Hi, Nicola.
Hello, Claire, and welcome back, everybody. I'd like to introduce to you Claire Wright, the CEO of Wright Training. Wright Training is a registered training organisation that provides quality assured, nationally recognised training and qualifications, and Claire is recognised as a leader in the field of heights access and rescue in the wind industry, accredited through Global Wind Organisation and the Australian Skills Quality Authority. Currently, Claire is leading a team of passionate trainers driving best practice standards to wind industry stakeholders to ensure the safety of those in the field. Please join me in welcoming Claire to the stage.
Thanks, Nicola. That's quite an introduction.
I can see your screen now,
I think that's
and
where
we're
we're
good
at.
to go.
Is that us?
Perfect.
Good grief. Guys, I'm here to talk to you about the training in Turbine. There's a big difference about training anywhere else. Training generally, we all know that training comes in various different stages and levels. I know you've heard from Pierre this morning about different types of training. Pierre's told us a huge amount of things, but he feeds into where we're at about the learning on the front line about what type of training we need to actually give our people to ensure a successful project all through. James has done the same. James has created a wealth of discussion. My goodness, hasn't he touched on so many things? We have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes about involving all of the industry groups and so on out there. The forum has been a massive project that we've all been working on to try and improve the standards, to try and improve what's going on currently in the wind industry. Now, training in turbine specifically is where I am and what I'm looking at. So what type of training is out there? Well, there's lots of different types. How do you get to your competent people out there on your wind farm jobs? How do you get to competent people on any jobs out there? There are GWO modules. So the Global Wind Organisation obviously has a number of training standards out there. There's many modules that they offer. Everything from their basic safety training, they offer advanced rescue, enhanced first aid. They get into blade repair, lift operations, slinger and signaller. So there's many options for you when it comes to GWO training modules. There's a lot of talk out there in the industry that's just, I've got my GWO, I'm fine. Well, what aspect of GWO do you have? GWO are continually adding more standards and more units, modules that you can complete to ensure that your team are actually covered all the bases of what they need to be doing. There is then Australian nationally recognised competencies. Now here in Australia, obviously, training packages are written and developed by those various different skills council groups, and they are developed for specific needs. Now, Australian nationally recognised competencies come from those training packages. There's not one written for the wind industry. Nobody's got together and actually said, we, the wind industry, are going to develop our own training package because these are the skills, competencies and components that our teams need to be working in turbines. Nobody's done that. And hence what we're doing is taking a number of competencies that are out there, so they're more generic versions. We're using manual handling from our health training package. We're using the first aid that covers all of those things here in Australia. We're using a work at height from a resource and infrastructure industries background, and we're using rescue competencies from our public safety training packages. The differences that we have then between our GWO and our Australian nationally recognised is quite simply that the GWO is focused very much on in turbines and how you need to work in the turbine scenario, whereas our Australian nationally recognised competencies are more generic competencies aimed at you and your work team working safely in those various different environments, covering those specific areas of competence. They work together. We offer a training program that gives you both GWO and Australian nationally recognised competencies together. We need to understand that the training you need is obviously dependent on what it is that you expect these teams to do. They have trades and specialist training and specialist skills in various different areas. And what we need to do is make sure that overall our people are competent. When it comes to these various different training packages and what we might need, GWO is made up of a huge amount of membership groups. So a number of you here today are part of the Global Wind Organisation. So all of those people have got together and decided that this is the bare minimum standard of what we need. Basic technical training is one of those things as well, so hydraulics, electrics, mechanics, and so on. These things are all part of the GWO. Now, the GWO members are obviously, the membership demand is what makes those GWO modules. One of those things that they're experiencing currently is a bottleneck. We're experiencing a bottleneck in not having enough trainers to be able to get the training to the teams that are then going to be on site. And that's, Pierre was telling us about people who have turned up on site who don't have the training and competency that they need. They don't have the experience required to be able to work safely in those environments. What we have obviously with this bottleneck is we've now got a pressure to decrease the time frame in which we're providing this training to people. There's a really big difference between having the time and opportunity, and obviously again our Australian competencies are focused on ensuring that people have the time and the resources to be able to actually then not only just copy and paste the skills, so monkey see, monkey do, but we're actually ensuring that people have taken on that skill and are able to repeat it multiple times rather than just the once. So in terms of training, we need to ensure that we are identifying the needs of our workforce, identifying what it is that they need to ensure that they're competent when working in turbines. Now, in a training centre, they learn the skills. This beautiful picture you're seeing here is a training centre. It's not one here in Australia. I got this from a friend. So they learn the skills in a training centre. Now, we have to be able to climb ladders. There's plenty of them in turbines. The gear and equipment that you see arrayed on the floor here is a beautiful example of the range of equipment and rescue components that you might be using when it comes to training and gaining those skills. When we're talking about training specifically for the turbine environment, we're focused on manual handling because there's some very awkward workplaces and plenty of gear and equipment that needs to be taken up and down those towers to your workplaces. We're also talking about fire awareness. One of the nasty things that you can get in turbines is a fire, and where do you go from that point? We look at first aid because nobody's coming up your turbine at all. It's how it works. You can call the emergency services as many times as you like and they will come out to your site and they will meet you at the base of your turbine. It's very rare that we get rescue professionals, so paramedics and so on, coming up and inside the towers themselves. They don't have the training, they don't have the skills, they don't have the familiarity with the work areas. Training in training centres, as you see, gives you the skills that you need. Training in a training centre is a very controlled environment. It allows you to gain the skills. It allows you to climb those ladders, to perform the rescue as necessary. It allows you to evacuate, use the equipment. What it doesn't do is give you an experience about how to apply that knowledge then in the turbine itself. It doesn't give you the same experience about being in a turbine. Those extra things, the peripheral bits and pieces. When you're training in a turbine, you get familiar with the environment you're in. How do you know that you're okay standing on the roof of a 120-metre turbine if you've never been there before? This is one of those things that Pierre mentioned about you can admit you've never done it before. If we give our people training in turbine, it means that they've met that experience in a controlled environment where we have plenty of supervision going on and people focused on what it is that they need to be learning. Whilst we are applying those skills and knowledge in turbine, we're also gaining that awareness of the peripheral aspects of what working in a turbine really means. Things like preparing to go to site, the driving, the parking, where do you put your vehicle in relation to the turbine itself, how far away? The peripheral aspects of working in a turbine, things like, have you signed on? Have you checked your SWIMS document? Do you have a start card or a take 5 or a stop for safety or a plan do review or a tailboard or whatever you call it? Have we done one of those and checked that we're actually all ready to go and get into a turbine itself? Have we worked out how to take our equipment up the turbine? How are you getting it there? It's one of those skills that you need that in a training centre is just not dealt with, whereas in a turbine, we certainly have to deal with how do you get there? Can you access your turbine? Can you climb the ladder? Do you take with you your equipment? Do you take lunch, snacks, water bottles and so on? And if you do, then how do you get them up the turbine itself? Training in a turbine is obviously an environment that is confronting to people who have never been in it before, but it does allow them to gain those additional skills in that they then start thinking about the work they're going to be doing, not just the I need to be able to climb a ladder, but that skill of that I need to be able to climb the ladder and take my equipment with me. Have I thought ahead? Am I working through these things? Training in turbine obviously gives us that great feel for what's going on. We start looking at things differently, not just, oh my goodness, I have to climb there, but even things like, how do I get my gear and equipment up, down, or anywhere similar? There's so many obstructions in a turbine. There's ladder brackets to worry about. There's hatches. There's all of these things. What we need to do is give ourselves a familiar environment at the very least. When it comes to evacuating your turbine, again, in a training centre, we do it from a low-level height. We use the equipment and everybody gets through that evacuation. Yep, I've used it. I know how it works. I'm okay. In a turbine, it's a much different scenario. How do you set it up? In a training centre, often it's already set for us. It is obviously an environment that we've tried hard to replicate a turbine with. The Global Wind Organisation standards require that our training centres are as close to the real thing as possible. And of course, we're better at that in some areas than others. Training in a turbine means that our team have not only seen what's going on, but have actually done it. They have seen that picture, they've done it and physically installed anchor straps here, hooked in there. They're aware of that extra redirect that you might need here or there or similar. They're aware of wind speeds. They're aware of what it means to actually get on that rope and descend the turbine. They gain confidence and familiarity with their equipment. They gain confidence in themselves and in their teams. So training in turbine is all about training the right way. It's making sure that our team is actually ready to continue to function, to move through. Training in a turbine also gives you that aspect of where am I going to be? Our training covers all of the different methods and all of the different practices in a turbine, the areas that we work. We get into the nacelle, we go to the roof, we get into the tower sections, we use the lifts, we use the ladders, we access all the way through. When we do a full all-encompassing program, we also get into the hub spaces and get ourselves familiar with how we get in and of course how we get back out again. Training in turbine is a valuable experience for our team, particularly when we're talking about those new workforces. There is obviously a massive boom. James told us all about how we've got huge amounts of construction projects happening in Australia currently. There's a number of projects happening concurrently. And what this means is that our skilled workforce is now having to distribute themselves across those projects. So we have the same amount of people everywhere on each different project. We've doubled up and more than that. So now we have less skilled workers out there and more people joining the industry. Training in turbine means that we're giving them the best idea of what they're doing. We're giving them that opportunity to get familiar with the environment they're in before we then start throwing work tasks at them as well. We start throwing those pressures and so on at them. So training in turbine means they've got that familiarity and we can give them those tasks to do. We can actually trust them to go out and do their job in turbines without needing additional personnel, without needing 10 times as many people to actually guide them through. We don't need to babysit them quite as much as they go because they have already experienced what it is to climb a ladder or to be in a nacelle or to use that hoisting gear and equipment up the inside or the outside. What we need to do is make sure, particularly on these large projects that are happening with new people involved, so new people to wind, new people to the environment itself, new people to construction potentially. We need to give them the best opportunity to provide them the best opportunity to maintain a safe workplace and a continuing successful project. And to do this, we can apply our skills in the turbine itself. So training in turbine is a really big focus of what our forum has been looking at and so on as well. As we then move on, there's been a number of questions and discussions about emergency planning. So there's emergency response plans, evacuation strategies, rescue plans, rescue procedures. There's so many different things going on out there and descriptions of what we are or aren't doing. Because an emergency response plan is a requirement by law. We must have actually worked out the types of emergencies we might face in our facilities, in our construction sites, in our plant generally, and we have to have a plan to be able to respond to that. A lot of the time, those emergency response plans, they talk about keys, about key personnel responsibilities. Who's doing this bit, who's doing that bit. The emergency response plan outlines, in the event of a medical emergency, the people on the scene provide first aid, DRS, ABCD. Who do they call for help? Well, they call their supervisors. The supervisors then, again, your emergency response plan has a whole list of sections. Your emergency response plan is then, these people then do these things. It's all about who's actually calling the emergency services to get them out and which emergency service do you need. The emergency response plan goes through the detail of who are you sending out to the gate to actually guide ambulance officers in to wherever you're going to. Who is it that gets the gear and equipment? Who gets the first aid kit that's located in the office and takes it out to wherever you might be? That's what your response plan is all about. When it comes to then the evacuation strategy, this is how do you get out of your turbine? Where do you go? Do you go off the roof? Do you go down through the hatch? Do you go down the tower itself? If you're in the hub space, can you go out the nose cone, or is there any option there? If not, then you have to come back in the turbine and through. So when it comes to our rescue planning, do you have it in a big long-winded document that nobody's ever read before? Often you have a turbine, the diagram that says, evacuate in these directions. Here's the big green arrows that you follow. We've all been on planes and we've had people going, exit via these doors here, please. It's the same thing in a turbine. We have that evacuation pathways. What we often don't have is the training that allows us then to do those rescues from the more complex places. Our GWO basic safety training includes, in our working at height section, it includes the access to a turbine, safely of course. It also includes rescue from a ladder, and it includes evacuation from the nacelle. That's what it does. Those are the key components. If you want to be then able to rescue your casualties from anywhere within that turbine space itself, then what you need to do is obviously take that further step into rescue planning and rescue training from those further areas. So our advanced rescue training, it works very nicely hand in hand with our enhanced first aid programs, which ensure that we can do the best we can for our casualty up turbine. We're not asking our technicians to be rescue professionals. We're not asking our technicians to be paramedics. We're asking our technicians to do the best they can in the circumstance they're in, because nobody knows your turbine like you do. Your workforce are the ones who are in that situation all the time. Those requirements about if you put a person at risk at work, it's your responsibility to take them out of that position of risk at work. Because I can assure you the paramedics are going to turn up to your site. It is unlikely that they're going to be able to climb a turbine. A lot of them don't have the training, they don't have the equipment. Many of them don't have the physical fitness to be able to get there. It's on you, the workforce that is on site at the time. And whilst you can get their assistance, what you need to do is be able to work yourselves, get your own team out of trouble. And that's the important part of emergency planning. When it comes to our emergency plans, we need to make sure that we have looked at all the various different areas in our turbines. There are a lot of nasty spaces in there. Those tight little areas where you can't quite fit. You've got to get there and get your casualty to safety. There's a number of emergency response plans that I've seen recently that outline things like, do not move the casualty, await emergency services. Now, the problem with that is that your emergency service teams will simply not be up your turbine. And it doesn't matter if you have a lift to assist them in getting there, there's still climbing necessary. There is still requirements to be trained and competent to get inside your turbines. If you're not trained and competent to get there, then obviously you need to ensure that you are guiding and actually looking after those people, so escorting them through the tower itself. If there's an emergency on, it's likely that the people who are available to guide and escort the emergency services are not those who are experienced in what they're doing and able to actually escort them appropriately to those areas where they're needed. We have to make sure that our own team are able to do these rescues and to perform rescues from these locations. Equipment is another one. We've heard from the team about the TecuSon team there about evacuating your turbine, because that's literally about evacuating your turbine should there be a fire or other type of emergency. If you now have a casualty, there's rescue equipment available. Some turbines keep their rescue equipment in the top of the turbine. Some rescue equipment is kept in the O&M building. Some equipment is with the team as they construct the towers. They take with them a rescue kit. Does your team know how to use it? Having the basics and then having that further training is an important one. The other part of it then is rescue procedures. How do you know what to do? I've seen a great emergency procedure out there. There's a number of them that says, here's the anchor point locations that you can use in our turbine. There's anchor points all over here. There's anchor points there. These are the things you can use. Here's the equipment that we have available. We have haul kits and we have rescue devices and we have stretchers and we have some awesome equipment to use. If your team haven't been trained in how to do it, then what are you going to do in the event of an emergency? A bit of brute force and ignorance, guys, is not always the way to go. And it's certainly not going to maintain the safety of your personnel. One of those key points of rescue is do no further harm to your casualty. Do your team know that to get somebody out of that space, they can remove the floor plate? Are you aware that you can change things? You can remove a hatch completely so it's out of the way rather than in your way. You can remove things in turbines and still keep them safe. Did your team know that? This is something that training in turbine obviously provides that awareness. Rescue procedures are the other one. There are a number of sites everywhere. We all have an emergency response plan and it outlines the personnel responsibilities. When it comes to how to do that rescue itself, there's simple statements in there that say, remove casualty from this location. There's no definition about how to actually do that. Training in turbine means that we've done it. We've followed those procedures. We've actually updated procedures in many occasions. And we are actually following those directions to ensure that should it happen, somebody is able to lead the team because they've seen it and done it before. Somebody is able to then guide everybody else in how they can assist to get this casualty down. There are a number of areas in our turbine, obviously, that are quite tight, restricted spaces, and we need to be able to deal with our casualties there. We need to make sure that we have looked at all of the different pathways that we need. We need to make sure that we have got an overall encompassed, this is our emergency response plan, and these are our rescue procedures should we need to do it from those difficult areas. Rescue planning and training in turbines. Guys, it can be quite involved. It can be something that our technicians find quite difficult to do. Our technicians need to build the turbine. They need to maintain the turbine. They are mechanics and electricians. They are fitters. They are experts in their field. They don't have to be rescue professionals, but if they have been through the training and they've been through the right training in the right environment, it gives them that much higher likelihood of being able to retrieve a casualty without doing further harm and actually get them safely to a position where medical services can get to them. So when it comes to getting all the way through your turbine, it's all about making sure that your team can work safely throughout. The whole project that we're looking at here about, it's the Wind Safety Construction Forum, guys. On your construction teams, do you have appropriate rescue planning? Do you have appropriate personnel around who can give you that assistance anywhere? Do you have people on your site who are trained and able to do this? as we progress through, guys, the conference itself, part of what we've been discussing in the forum is making sure that we actually have a full plan moving forward. Pierre was talking about the starting point, the preparation. 2-week changes make a massive difference when you've organised personnel coming to site, you've organised the electricity team, you've organised mobilisation even. There's a number of you in the audience today that are looking at your teams that go to site. They're coming from all over the country, potentially all over the world. It takes time to shift a crane from one location to another on site, let alone from the other side of the country where you've been building something last. So preparation doesn't just stop once we've got the project running. It then is continuing that preparation into, am I prepared in the event that something goes wrong at any stage of the job, at any stage of the build? Am I prepared because I've got trained and competent personnel? And that's where that job ready for wind is our starting point, that motivational induction. Are we prepared and have thought about training people, making sure that they have a plan about getting to and from site? Fatigue management, driving management, what time of day do we go and come back? These sorts of things are important to consider. The training in Turbine means that we've given our people the best opportunity to actually be familiar with the environment before they start getting focused on what their actual job is. Rescue planning is an important part of that, to ensure that people are aware of how to do those rescues from those difficult locations inside turbines. I know that we're moving on to see a number of other people out there. I know that some of our speakers coming up have got some great things to tell us about the focus on who those leadership personnel are and how to get them into the right positions. So that's what I needed to talk about, really. I wanted to thank the team, obviously, for getting to this stage in the first place. There's a lot of forum members out there that have helped us define what is good in turbines, what is good when it comes to those safe work practices. And that's really what we're all about.
Thank you so much, Claire. One of the things that I'm thoroughly enjoying coming through this event with you all is the passion that you all share for the industry. And coming from high-risk industrial sector for many years myself, something that's sadly lacking in the majority of sectors, I would suggest, is real industry training, real practical competencies in environments that are real environments. How difficult is it to gain that buy-in and corral all of these people in situ in a turbine and make this happen so that it's practical training in a real sense?
Look, it does take a lot of motivation in the first place. The great thing about training new people to turbines is that they're all desperate to get into the turbine. They're desperate to get there and see it. This means that our focus can all be on that. You can't get there until you know how to do this first. You can't get there until you know about how to position your body appropriately. You can't get there until you know how to look after yourself if you have nicked your finger or caught your knee weirdly or any of those things. So people are quite motivated as we get there. And then they're in a turbine and it's a new environment and it's new and it's exciting and those things. And then, of course, it comes back to our trainers and our training team to ensure that we're focused on what they're doing. Have you got that strap hooked up correctly? Are you twisted there? Is that connected at this point? Oh my goodness, everybody stop. Are you moving something there? Is that making something unsafe? It's a real thing that trainers need to be so familiar with their own environment to be able to then impart the skills that they need to be imparting, but to make sure that they're maintaining the safety of everybody out there. It's one of the reasons that our training team is so passionate and dedicated to what they do. There's a number of the photos that you saw in that presentation. It's quite tricky to get to those positions. As a trainer, you therefore need to make sure that before you put anybody there, they know what they're getting into, and you've got a spot where you can see what's going on is a really important one.
Which would be challenging in some of those little smaller areas as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think newcomers to the industry underestimate the level of fitness that they require just for day-to-day operations, let alone in a critical
100%.
Incident scenario?
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that people seem to fail to realise is that whilst there are lifts in turbines, certainly the bigger we get, the more lifts there are about the place. Well, you need to get there somehow. This is not the same thing as being in the shopping centre where you call the lift and it comes to you. The lift goes to the top, and then unless somebody's sent it all the way down, it stays at the top. So one of the things about rescue planning and rescue training and just general training that we go through is, can you actually get there? If there's something gone wrong at the top of your turbine, there's a small team at the top. It might be 2 people working in the turbine. If the one of them has an issue, the other one is providing first aid and dealing with them. And it's unlikely that they have the time and the resources to be able to leave their casualty alone in the turbine for the time it takes them to gear up, harness on, get down to the lift level, send the lift down to somebody else, and then come back up again to bring all the gear and equipment up. So it means that when the rescue personnel turn up, which is technicians who have been on another turbine, they've been to the O&M, they've collected the rescue equipment, the extra stretchers, the extra whatever they might need. And what they get is then, okay, who's going to climb and go and get the lift down to us? So there is definitely a level of physical fitness that is required to be able to climb these turbines day in, day out. And we're not climbing all the way every time, but in the event of an emergency, somebody needs to climb.
And I think it's an experience that as much as you try and replicate and provide real scenarios in a training centre environment, you don't get all of those factors, do you? It's just
Absolutely
impossible
not.
to hit all of those marks in
We're
a scenario environment, not the real deal.
Yeah, it's very definitely challenging. And we find that, it's very difficult to find trainers. We are continually on the search for good trainers and to try and ensure that our training team are expanding as the demand increases. I know the GWO at the moment are building that. So I'm involved in writing and developing the trainer instruction standard. So what we need our instructors to have as GWO trainers. And the demand for that is there simply because we need trainers that know the environment. We need trainers who can actually replicate that when you are in a training centre environment and be able to describe those areas and say, when you're here, when you are under the floor, you're below the generator, guys, you need to get your casualty into a stretcher. Now, it's not like the workshop floor where you can move around and step from one side to the other. Careful casualty handling always means don't step over your casualty if you can. And then, of course, we get somebody in a turbine and it's quite a different scenario. One of our new training team members is a paramedic, and he's had some very, very big changes in that, oh my goodness, really? Is this where we are? It's like, don't move your casualty until you get there. Make sure that you're not stepping over them back and forth. Don't move them as much as possible. And then he's looked into a turbine and gone, forget all of that, because you can't not step over them. There's no room anywhere.
Yeah.
It's been a great thing.
Thank you so much. If anyone would like to spend some time with Claire's going to head over to her booth now. Please head to the left-hand side of your screen, click on booth, and you can take a seat and talk to Claire there. Or you can send her a private message or call her directly on the platform. Thanks so much, Claire.
Thanks, Nicola.